Hello, this is episode 7. I'm here with, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, sir.
Hi, I'm Tommy Barrett.
Yeah, Mister Tommy, he comes to the jiu-jitsu classes here at Independent MMA and Fitness. And I wanted to interview him and get his background, not only like life-wise and also investing-wise. So if you wanted to start off talking about in terms of like your background, the same background you like sent me in your synopsis you sent me online.
Okay, well, I was born in Griffin, Georgia in 1962, and we actually lived in Jonesboro, although I was born at the hospital there. We moved to Columbus for a little while, moved back to Griffin in 1969.
You still currently live in Griffin, too,
And I
right?
still currently live there.
Nice. Yeah.
And my mother was from Griffin. My father was from Pike County, which is one county south of Spalding County, the county seat, where Griffin's the county seat. And I went to Griffin High School, graduated there in 1980,
Yeah.
went to Auburn University, graduated there in December 1983, and then came back to my hometown. Wasn't planning on doing that.
Yeah.
That just happened to be what I did. I had got an accounting degree from Auburn, and then I got a job in Atlanta in a management training program with a bank, and lived in my parents' basement a little while to save money. I was always on the frugal side.
Yeah. You said, too, that when you were growing up, I forget what age this was, but your dad had a real estate company, right?
He did.
Doing property, what do you call it, assessments.
Well, yeah, he mainly speculated on land. I would call it speculation because he would buy, let's just say, a 30-acre tract, and then he'd try to turn around and sell it as either 10 3-acre tracts if there was enough road frontage, or 3 10-acre tracts, or 10 3-acre tracts, just whatever he could to sell it for more than he paid for it.
Mostly to, like, the developers, right?
No, really, it was to retail customers. This was back in the 70s and 80s. Of course, back in the 70s when I was a kid working, so a lot of people would just be building small homes, or either putting manufactured homes out on this property out in the country.
Yeah.
And he would owner finance it for them. He would owner finance it, and they would typically have to get a well and a septic tank, and he would usually, I think it's called I can't think of what he would let them get a loan at the bank. I think the right term, but he would normally, the manufactured home people, if he would let them put the manufactured home there, and so they had to get a well and a septic tank, and he would owner finance the land.
Yeah.
Then they would get the manufactured home company would owner finance the manufactured home. Their only problem was who's going to pay for the well and the septic tank.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the bank, that's what it is. The bank would make the loan on the well and the septic tank, and he would let his lien status be second to the bank for the well and the septic tank, because he felt like if they did not pay him, if he had to foreclose on them, well, it's already got the well and the septic tank now. Anybody would need that, so that was worth the money.
It's already embedded in there.
So that was an embedded value that was worth it.
That's super cool. What do you do specifically for him?
Well, I'll answer the phone, and I'd go out and we'd mark the property lines. Think about it. When he would buy this 30-acre tract of land, and let's say, to keep the math easy, he would divide it into 5 6-acre tracts. And he'd have a surveyor come survey it, but the surveyor would just go in there, and they would cut these lines, and he'd want me painting every one of these lines with yellow paint, and he'd want me to put a property for sale sign, not in front of the property. We put a for sale sign on every corner of the property, of all 6 corners, and then we just put a lot sign, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in front of the lots.
Why do you do it on the corners?
That way, when we sent, so if, let's say, Densu wanted to move out of the country, he was tired of living in the city, we'd go down there and you could see where the property lines were. So we'd say
you see what the extent of what you're on the debt.
Yeah, they're on the lines. You'll see that the lines are painted with yellow paint if you want to walk out there. Because my dad did not want to have to meet the people out there.
Yeah.
Because that took us time.
Yeah.
And so many people wouldn't show up.
Yeah, too. Yeah.
So this was normally property out in the country. So it would take him at least 20 minutes, if not 30, to get there.
Yeah.
You'd go there and people won't show. So you just tell them where it was.
Yeah.
And we'd say, we'll mail you a plat. You go out there and look at it, and we'll spend back then 25 cents on a stamp. We'll mail you a plat. The plat will be there in 2 days in the mail.
Oh, wow.
That was cheaper than us getting in the car and going out there and wasting the money on the gas.
So do y'all ever basically sell to people without ever seeing them in person?
There may have been people that we didn't meet till they came in. and said they wanted to buy it.
Buy it, yeah, was serious
That was
about
really
it.
the way it worked. You know, you call us back if you want to buy it.
Mm-hmm.
My dad had a saying: we don't make our money when we sell the property.
Yeah.
We make our money when we buy it. Because we buy the right property at the right price.
Yeah.
With the right amount of road frontage. We know, because that's what he did. He knows what it's worth.
Yeah.
He knows what he can retail it for. So he made it. Says, I made my money when I buy it. Says, when you're an amateur, you buy things and you try to up the price enough to, you know, when you're having to talk people into buying it.
Yeah.
So that's the losing game.
Damn, yeah.
You want people to see this property and know this is a fair price. Oh yeah, I want this.
Yeah.
And of course his terms made it good too, because he would normally let people pay $500 down.
Yeah.
He would finance the loan over
time.
over 7 or 10 years, because it's a piece of property. He was selling them for $10,000 or $15,000.
What do you say would be the benefit for somebody doing that in terms of having somebody finance over a long period of time? Do you feel like it can actually help people put things at a higher price if they allow people to be able to finance? As then the person sees, well, I don't have so much money now, but okay, I can finance this over time, and then it makes it that much more enticing and be able to get.
Absolutely, and truthfully, it made him be able to get a better price for the property. Let's say, for this example, my dad bought this 30 acres for $2,000 an acre, $60,000 total, right? And if he divided it into 5-6 acre tracts, and he might try to sell it in a 6-acre tract, it's probably worth $3,000 an acre.
Oh wow, yeah.
So, but now to get that $3,000 an acre, he's got to be willing to only take $500 down. He's got to be willing to owner finance it. Then he tried to get whatever a fair rate was. Now, back in those days, the rate was probably 8%, but interest rates were way higher.
Yeah.
So he would charge probably less than the bank would get, but you know, bank rates were just going crazy in the 70s. So he would owner finance it for that, and it's amazing. The vast majority of the people paid for the property.
Yeah.
Because they saw it was a good deal.
Yeah.
They owned the real estate. The real estate was never going to, you know, it was never going to, it did not, in those days, never depreciated. You couldn't tear it up. It was the land.
Yeah.
A lot of people did put a manufactured home on it, but surprisingly, 10 or 20 years later, a lot of people then would build a nice home on the property.
Yeah.
But when they were young, they might have just put a single wide mobile home.
Over it.
Yeah, you know, he sold property all the time to 25-year-old couples.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like I say, and so then, it seemed to work out. Hardly anybody gave the land back to him.
So,
and in fact, normally, what few people, normally because they got a divorce, they say, look, you know, going our separate ways, we're not going to. My dad would normally say, if you'll just come down here and deed the property back over to me, save me going through the foreclosure.
Yeah.
Won't put anything in your credit. Just come deed it back over to me, you know.
That's really cool.
And we'll don't work. Now, of course, my dad kept the $500 down.
Yeah.
He kept whatever payments they made
were
to
making.
him. He would tell me, you could either resell the property on your own.
Yeah.
Or you can just deed it back over to me, and then I'll resell it to somebody else. And a few people, normally because they had either divorce or some
like
unusual situation. But a lot of times in divorce, one of them would want the property.
Yeah.
So it'd only be occasionally that neither one of them
would want it at all.
Yeah, they were just so mad with each other, you know.
Yeah.
That was on the case that somebody still want the property and the place to live.
Well, what led up to? Because I know you eventually started investing in properties, right? What was your journey after college that led up to that point?
Okay. Well, the journey that really started that was me sitting in Auburn University in my little apartment.
Yeah.
And I was looking, I'll admit it, at a Playboy magazine.
Yeah.
And in the back of a Playboy magazine was an ad for a book called How to Wake Up the Financial Genius Inside You. I said, well, sounds like what I need to do.
Yeah.
It wasn't much. And, it might have been $9.99, which was actually a decent amount of money.
Yeah.
40 years ago.
Yeah.
It would have probably been spring of 1981. So I ordered the book, have no idea what it was about. And it was about buying rental property and using the bank's money or the seller's money, owner financing it to you, and then trying to then use your tenant's money to pay back the loan, and you live off, hopefully, the difference.
Yeah.
So that was my start. So I read this book then, and I did not implement this plan until 1985. By then, I had graduated from college in December of '83, went to work for a bank in Atlanta for the year 1984, And then my dad said, look, I'm closing this real estate business up. If you want to come here and try to make something out of it, come back. I came back, and the speculating on real estate, on buying and selling stuff like he did, to me was harder to do then, because the county commission wouldn't let you just subdivide a property.
Yeah.
They'd say, you got to come to us, get our approval.
Yeah.
Things were getting tougher.
You think it increasingly got tougher to do that over time?
It did, and because, rightfully so, some people would come in and do a junky development.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, some of my dad's developments, the people wound up being a little on the junky side. Because he did not put a lot of restrictions on it most of the time. He just, he believed in private property rights, and you own the property, do with it what you want.
Yeah.
And so, but the local county commissioners didn't like that, because people would put junk out there.
Yeah.
And so that I didn't.
And then devalues the property.
And devalues the other property owners around it.
Yeah.
Would get mad. So I didn't. So that was tougher. So I started buying rental property. And what I did, the normal game plan, was I would buy. Griffin was a mill town, so I'd go out and buy old houses. The mills originally built, and the mill would then rent the house to their employees, and the employees worked for the mill. So these houses were typically 4-room houses. No halls. It was kind of like a double-barrel shotgun house. But instead of I think of a shotgun house being 3 straight rooms, and these were just 2 rooms, 2 on each side. So it was really nicer than a shotgun house.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I would buy those houses for $15,000, and I'd rent them out for $250 a month. Normally, my payment would be about $175 a month. So I had about a $75 a month spread to cover property taxes, insurance, any vacancies, and try to put some money in my pocket.
Do you do property management too at that time period?
I only managed a couple of properties for other folks. Seemed like we did a couple, but not many.
Yeah, so you mostly managed over your own properties?
Yeah, it was mostly properties I owned. And believe it or not, back then, I could get the banks to loan me the full $15,000.
Yeah.
Probably the reason being was it was back then the banks had good experience with, if you didn't want the house, somebody else always wanted to buy those houses and rent them out at that price. And they were charging me about 12% interest too.
Yeah.
So I was but that was the going rate for a person doing what I was doing.
Yeah.
Interest rates were higher then.
Yeah.
And that rate was only locked for 3 years, but based on a 15-year payout. So every 3 years, I had to hope interest rates hadn't spiked.
Yeah.
Because if interest rates had shot up, the bank would charge me more. But if they'd come down,
they'll charge
the
you
rate
less.
would come down. I think I was paying 2% over prime, whatever the prime interest rate was. It seemed like back then I had to pay 2% over prime, and they'd lock it for 3 years. But like I say, based on a 15-year payout. So the bank didn't want the house back. But they didn't think they'd get it back. They also thought, well, I had a college degree in accounting. I'd grown up in the real estate business. And I'd become a real estate appraiser. And that's another part of the story was I became my dad, when he saw I wasn't good at buying and selling property. I didn't think that would work for me. He mentioned to me, you might want to try becoming an appraiser. I see a demand for that. Banks are always calling me wanting to do appraisals, and I don't want to fool with that. To me, it doesn't pay much. It takes so much of my time. And I said, well, what does it pay? I think back then it paid about $100 in appraisal. I said, that doesn't sound too bad to me. $100. And I said, so I started doing that. And I think that also helped banks want to loan me the money. This guy's an appraiser. He grew up in the real estate business. He's got a college degree. Things are more likely to work out for him than they would be for just some guy that,
that didn't have that much
had no background in it.
Especially for the time period. I know now it's more popular to do, unless not necessarily popular in terms of like it's super widespread, but it seemed like a lot of people are utilizing that method of getting houses to be able to rent out to people as investment properties.
Yeah, it seems to me like everybody's in the business of selling courses and books on that now.
Yeah.
Maybe they always were, but when I bought that book at 19 years old, to me that was something new. I'd never thought about that. But of course, I was 19. I didn't have much life experience, so maybe people had been talking about doing that forever.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily the word now. People are like, especially when I read that, I was like, oh well, people now are basically just it's not like you're reinventing a wheel or whatnot. It's something that's been going on
Been
for a
going
long
on
time.
forever.
It's just more people are actually, learning about it now. Now, do you think that it's still beneficial to do it now in terms of investing wise, and why?
I think it has been good for people these last few years because real estate values shot up.
Mm-hmm.
So think about it. If you buy the house at one price and it goes up in value to another, the rent will go up with the value of the house.
Yeah.
But your loan is being paid down.
Mm-hmm.
So you're stuck at your cost is fixed at what you paid for it.
Yeah.
So, but it really depends on, do you know values?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know and how to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Because I was all learning as I went.
Yeah.
And I wound up using the money I made appraising houses really to subsidize my rental property business I was building.
Yeah.
But in the back of my mind, I was thinking, if I could get to 100 houses at $250 a month, that's $25,000 a month. And in 15 years, they'll all be paid for.
Yeah.
And even if the rents never go up, I'll be making $25,000 a month. So as a kid's mind, this sounds. That was just simple math.
Yeah.
And that winds up, it's a whole lot harder to make it work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
People are trying to cheat you on the rent. You have people legitimately that can't pay the rent.
Mm-hmm.
You have people trying to trick you that they legitimately can't
pay
pay the rent.
Yeah.
You have people claiming their kid's sick.
Yeah.
When that happens legitimately, they had to stay out, take care of the kid. Then you have people that use that when it's not legitimate. And then you have the local city building city commissioners that want to force you to make this house really nice, which sounds good in theory, but yet this person can only afford $250 a month rent.
Yeah, but you make it nice, then the rent want to go up.
Yeah, but you can't buy a house for $15,000 and spend $10,000 on it and still rent it for $250 a month.
Yeah.
But that's all most people probably could afford to pay.
Yeah, at that time.
35 years ago. In fact, when I sold that business 5 years later, the person that bought them from me, by then maybe the rents were $275, so I got 17. I got a little more for him. But then he tried to go in there and put new central heat and air in all these houses. These houses did not have central heat and air. They had typically space heaters, and I would let the tenants put their own window air conditioners in
inside
them.
of them.
That way,
I remember those growing up too.
But that way, if somebody stole your air conditioner, it was on them. It wasn't my air conditioner.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It wasn't on you.
Yeah, and you notice people take care of things better if it was theirs. And so, but the person I sold out to really made the houses nice. Probably may even spent $10,000-$15,000 on them.
Yeah.
Wound up losing them.
Yeah.
They refinanced and borrowed the money to do all that.
Yeah.
But then they tried to raise the rent from, by then it was probably $275 when I sold them. Tried to raise the rent to $400 a month or $500, but the people just couldn't afford it. Either couldn't or wouldn't. Yeah. Because the person, it's my understanding, wound up losing a bunch of those houses for people that bought them.
Do you think it's because of the location they were in mostly? Because of the demographic that was mostly in those locations?
Probably because these were, the world, everybody's continually raising our standard of living.
Yeah, definitely.
And people are leaving these lower income areas. Yeah. And so only people left there you have a lot of good older poor people, but the young people that are staying there probably don't want to work or something. You know what I mean? I loved renting to older poor people.
Yeah.
Man, they got their Social Security check. They grew up renting. They didn't have a chip on their shoulder about renting the house. You leave them alone, they left you alone. And they were a lot of good people.
Yeah, and they were less likely to try to out of paying rent for whatever reason.
They knew you had to pay rent. Yeah. And now you let their kids or grandkids come along, and they may have a chip on the shoulder about paying you rent. Yeah. So they're trying to find,
whatever type of way out of it.
Trying to find a way out of it, So that was, and so I was only in that business from 1985 to 1990. Had a guy approach me about buying me out of it, and at the time I got up to about 60-something houses. Wasn't planning to sell at that time. I got to thinking about, all the stress. I had to pay. I had full-time maintenance people. Yeah. And then you had to make sure that half time you ride by the house, where they at? Well, of course, they'd always claim they were at Home Depot getting supplies, but
And were you still working at the bank during this time period?
No, I was appraising houses.
Okay.
I was appraising houses for cash flow. Yeah. And buying rental properties with that money. And of course, borrowing the money mainly to buy them, but it took the cash flow from my own cash flow to subsidize the maintenance, and when the vacancies were up, and sometimes when insurance and taxes came due.
too as well. Yeah, I mean it's a lot. It definitely is a lot of factors that goes into like managing over this in terms of like.
And it's a lot of the factors you can think about it there, but getting along with people can be tough. It's of course. You want to get along with them, but then you realize they're trying to find a way to not pay you the rent.
Right, yeah.
But your bank note's still due. If I called up, I had a lot of loans at the Bank of Griffin, which a lot of loans at the Bank of Zebulon.
Yeah.
When you call them up, Densu didn't pay the rent,
Yeah.
but he says he'll pay me in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
The bank says, not my problem.
Yeah, I don't care. Where's my money?
You pay the money.
Yeah.
You pay your loan by the 10th,
Yeah.
or you're going to have to pay the late fee. And now
anyway,
payment instead of being $175 that month, it'll be $210. So you got all those things going on. It's all these simple things that become big problems.
Well, if somebody wanted to get into that nowadays, in today's time, what type of advice would you give them?
First thing comes to my mind is the first thing I would do is I'd probably buy a house and live in it, a small house. And then when I got ready to upgrade to a nicer house in a couple of years, I would rent out my old house. That would be an easy way to dip into it, and that would cause you to be able to get the lowest rate, longest term loan. Now, I haven't talked to mortgage companies in a while, but I would think that right now you could go get a 30-year loan at a low fixed rate because you're going to live there. And after a couple of years, I don't know what the minimum they make you live there, but I think then you could, so your payment's going to be lower than you would buy as a commercial deal.
Yeah.
So then that'd be a good way to ease into it. That's what I would recommend, and then see how you like it.
What area of like real estate do you think is best in terms of investing in?
What was easiest for me was a single family residential, because if you ever, that's what people wanted to live. When I bought a duplex, it was always more trouble.
Yeah, why is that?
I guess people didn't have as much privacy, their own feeling of their own place. They moved. They never stayed there as long.
Yeah.
Duplex
so you
people
constantly having to cycle through
turn over. Every now and then the tenants wouldn't get along. Who's going to cut the grass?
Yeah.
They'll cut half of it. Or if it's a duplex, well, they want me to cut it. Well, a single-family house is easy to say, Densu, I'm renting you this home. Obviously, you're going to be expected to cut the grass, take over it. And also in a single-family home, let's just say, for whatever reason you want to sell it, I can sell it both to an investor or a homeowner. If you own a duplex, it's most likely only going to go to investors. Sure, occasionally people will buy it to live in one side but not the other, but that's not normal. But if you buy a single-family home, it's easier to get out from under it because you got two different people can buy it.
Yeah.
You got an investor can buy it at investment price. You got a homeowner that can buy it for a little more money if the area stay good.
Yeah.
So I would like single-family homes.
All right, so that segues into when do you start dealing with like banking too as well, in terms of when you start working for the bank? And I know you also like invested in startup banks too. Is that correct?
That is correct. I went to work for a bank right out of college, but I only worked there in 1984. And then what got me into investing in banks was, I walked in the Bank of Griffin to make my deposit one day, and I heard that the Bank of Griffin had sold out to Bank South. And I heard, as I remember the story, people that had put $5,000 in that bank when it started were getting $60,000. 18 years later, the bank, I believe it opened in 1967. I think it was now 1985. It seems like it was about 18 years later. And I said, wow, I like that.
Yeah.
I want to put $5,000 in stuff and get $60,000 18 years later.
Yeah.
And so, but what really got me, so then by then I had a financial calculator that would figure rates of return, because I used that doing commercial appraisals. And but I figured putting $5,000 in something, and 18 years later getting $60,000, it wound up, it was only a 15% annual rate of return, even though it's 12 times your money. So some people could say that's 1,200% of what you put in, but that's not figuring the amount of time. And so I think, so that got me interested in, I said, I want to invest next time somebody starts up a bank.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years after that, a bank only like a block over. It was a savings and loan. It was already there.
Yeah.
But it was a mutual savings loan, which means it had no owners. It was just sponsored.
Yeah.
It was a government sponsorship, I guess, for lack of a better term. But they were going to convert to being stock owned. So I got very interested. I said, man, I think this is something I need to get in on.
Yeah.
And so I kept, I was asking everybody about it. What do you think? And one day, the president of the bank, when I was in there making my deposit, he called me in the office and said, Tommy, come here.
Yeah.
I was at the old Bank of Griffin, which was now Bank South. The guy calls me in his office and says, look, Tommy, yeah, that's going to be a good deal, but you got to quit talking to everybody about it.
Yeah, so other people don't.
We don't want everybody else to invest in it because as I recall the numbers were, that bank had $3 million in retained earnings. That mutual savings association. It was not. It was a mutual savings and loan association. It had been started, I think, in 1960, and this was about 1988. It had like $3 million. It had profited retained earnings over time.
Yeah.
And the guy says, look, whoever buys that bank now, we're not going to be giving our money to somebody else. We're going to be giving our money to ourselves.
Yeah.
Because we're going to become the owners.
Yeah.
It says in the government, it's come down here and appraised the bank and said because it's got $3 million in retained earnings, we're going to make y'all, the new stockholders, pay $3 million for it. But I got to thinking, I said, but we're going to be paying the $3 million to the bank, so now it's going to have $6 million. He goes, yeah. So shut up. We're going to do. We don't want everybody else to get that $3 million.
Yeah.
And the guy goes, yes, I'm going to buy the maximum amount allowed for myself and for my and for my wife. And I said, okay. I went in on this deal. I said the maximum amount you could buy was $120,000. I didn't have but about $5,000 in cash because all my money was subsidized in my rental property business. I said, and I don't think I could make a payment. Even if somebody loaned me on $120,000, that might be stretching what I could. I don't think so. I said, but I'd like to buy $60,000 worth of stock in it. I told the president. He said, okay. I said, you going to do that? I said, yeah. And I said, I need your bank to loan me the money.
Yeah.
He looked at me and said, well, I said, you've just told me what a good deal it is, how much the stock's going to be worth, so I'll give you the stock for collateral.
Yeah.
He goes, well, but my bank regulators won't necessarily like, I'm going to need a little more collateral. I said, okay, I'll give you a second mortgage on my house, and I'll give you a second mortgage on some of my rental properties.
Yeah.
So I said, okay. He said, all right, so I'll do that. So I'll loan you $60,000. You're going to give me what was Griffin Federal Savings and Loan. You're going to give me stock in the new bank it's going to become, which is going to be Griffin Federal Savings Bank.
Yeah.
You're going to give me that stock as collateral. You're going to give me a second mortgage on your house. And you're going to give me a second mortgage on a few of your rental properties. And you're not going to talk about this to anybody else. You're going to quit talking about this investment.
Yeah.
I said, okay. So I left. Oh, and I also mentioned to him, I'm a real estate appraiser. They're a savings and loan that makes home loans.
Yeah.
So I'm planning on hopefully getting all their appraisal business too.
Oh, wow.
And so he looked at me and said, yeah. This should be a really good deal for you, Tommy.
Yeah.
And this guy was, he was older than my dad, who's 24 years. This guy was probably 30 years older than me. So he said, Tommy, and he was kind of a mentor to me because I was a young businessman. So I think this will be a good deal. And so he loaned me the money, and immediately they started calling me for all their appraisals. So my appraisal business boomed.
Yeah, it went straight up.
Well, we just went boomed, and so it just worked out phenomenal.
Yeah.
It worked out. It was a good deal for me, but it was a good deal for them too because I gave them great service because I owned $60,000 worth of their stock, and I'm 25, 26 years old because I got to make a payment on that loan.
Yeah.
So so I needed to do those appraisals for them
so that you can be able to
make the money.
Yeah.
To pay his loan. In fact, I think we discussed that with the banker. He said, "Well, how are you gonna pay me back?"
What, did the bank give you a loan, or did he specifically?
No, the bank did. Oh no, it was the bank. But he was the president of the bank.
Oh, the bank. Yes.
But he still has to do things that are legal. Banks can't just do whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
There's bank regulators.
Yeah.
And in fact, he had started his career as a bank regulator, and then became a banker. Wow. He'd grown it. So he said, "Look, we got to do this by the book. So you got to give me some other collateral."
Yeah.
So I gave him a second mortgage on my house, second mortgage on that, and so I was able to make enough money in appraisals off of my investment to more than fund the loan. And then it wound up because the bank had been around. They paid a dividend. It just wound up being a really good deal there for the first several years.
Yeah.
The first 10 years is a great deal.
Yeah.
But I wound up, let's see, that was in 1988. But by the time the Great Recession hit in 2009, the bank had sold out to another bank.
Yeah.
And the stock dropped to almost worth nothing.
Were you able to buy out before that time or afterwards?
I did not. I did not sell out at the bottom. I held, and when the stock recovered some, I did wind up selling the stock, I think, for $120,000, and I'd paid $60 for it. But it was 30 years later. That's not a good deal.
Yeah.
Double your money every 30 years. That's a 3% rate of return, and it's a horrible deal.
Yeah.
Because remember, previously we talked about somebody investing $5,000 to bank. 18 years later, they got $60,000, 12 times their money. So I was hoping to get 12 times my $60,000, which would have been what, $720,000, and I wound up selling for $120,000 30 years later, and not 18 years later. So that's the ups and downs of being a businessman.
Did you end up investing in the other startup banks?
Yeah, I did. So because the bank did not have trouble till 2009 in the Great Recession. So starting in 1990, when I sold all the rental property, I had my cash flow from the appraisal business, and I started going to law school at night. But I started taking the money I was making and buying in startup banks all over the state. And how, you might question, well, how did I find out about them? Well, you could go to the Georgia Banking Commission, and it seemed like I paid to get a newsletter from them that came out once a month, and it showed who had applied for a bank charter. And then, so you'd see the name of the person. Usually it'd be an attorney or something. And so then, who was going to be present, and then we would contact these people about getting a prospectus to become an initial founding investor. So I did that, and I probably invested as a founding investor in over 20 startup banks in the state.
Wow.
Sounds wow.
Yeah.
Started off really
good.
And then and some of them did sell out and do really well. In fact, some of them did so well they came back to the investors and said, we're growing so fast, we need more money to continue our growth, because the bank regulators say you have to have so much in capital.
Yeah.
It was a ratio. Now, I don't know the exact ratio, but let's just say it's 10 to 1. For every $1 million you've got in capital, you can make $10 million in loans. And most banks would start off raising about $10 million, so they could, or probably raised about $5 million back then, so they could make about $50 million in loans. And once they made $50 million in loans, they needed more capital. So if they did really well, and we thought they were going to sell out, then I'd use the same Griffin Federal stock that I'd acquired. And now I would use it as collateral on a commercial line of credit to buy more stock in the ones I thought were growing really well and had a chance of selling out. So initially I'd only put a minimal investment in these. And then the ones, if they came back needing more money because of growth, not come back needing more money because they've lost all the money, then would be the time to put more money in it. And sometimes in a couple of years later, they'd sell out, and I'd have a really big hit on those. I'd make a really good amount of money. Now, unfortunately, when 2009 hit, out of those 20 startup banks, over half of them went under. I lost all of those initial investments.
Yeah, that sucks.
So that sucked.
Yeah.
That sucked.
Well, I guess you can say too that like investing period is like, we call this a risk, but I mean everything is like that though. When it comes to working for people, when it comes to putting your money into anything or your time into anything, you're doing it. You should know that there's a risk involved in it, even if it's not like right, in front of you. It'd be a long-term risk.
Yeah, absolutely. But as a young person, you're so wanting everything to do good.
Yeah.
You're wanting to still do good. You have blinders on your eyes of a lot of the risk.
Yeah.
And that is why I kind of really hedged my bets. And in 1990, I really started investing a lot in index mutual funds. And I think me and you've talked, an index fund really just buys whatever stocks are in that index. Like, for instance, the S&P 500 is something a lot of people have heard of. That's the 500 largest publicly traded companies in this country. Well, the S&P 500 index simply owns all 500 of those companies. And I started investing in money like that. I knew it was going to be a longer, slower thing. It was never going to make this huge hit.
Right.
But over time, it had historically averaged about a 10% rate of return.
Yeah.
And I knew that at a 10% rate of return, I would double my money every 7.2 years, which was still pretty good. And so I started doing that, and luckily I did that. And that's where it was just way less risky. You got 500 companies, all 500 aren't going to go under.
Yeah, yeah.
And because it's an index fund, you're paying a very minimal amount of fee.
Yeah.
And so I always reinvested the dividends and the capital gains. And I just put my money in that every month, some extra savings. And I did my retirement account. I did a self-employed pension through Vanguard and invested in their index fund there.
Yeah.
And that is really what's carried me through. And that's really what I'm the most proponent of now because it doesn't require any work and has so much less risk.
Well, how does somebody go about doing that?
Well, you simply go on the internet and go to one of many companies. I prefer Vanguard because I've been with them 30 years.
Yeah.
Fidelity does the same thing. There's a lot of other companies, but Vanguard is mutually owned, kind of like the old Griffin Federal Savings. Almost nobody owns Vanguard. Actually, as a account holder, I'm an owner of Vanguard.
Yeah.
Even though I never get any dividend, I can't sell the stock.
Yeah.
So, but means they don't have to try to make a profit for the shareholders. So their fees at Vanguard, the way I understand it, they only charge you enough fee to truly cover their expense.
Yeah.
They don't charge you as much as they think they can get.
Yeah.
That's what a for-profit business does. That's their job, is to make a profit for their shareholders.
Yeah.
But so when you have a business that doesn't have any shareholders, they can simply charge. Vanguard only charges enough for what it thinks the actual administrative expenses are to run that. Now there are other for-profit companies. I won't call any names there, that they'll have some funds that they don't charge you anything on. But then they have other funds they charge you too much on.
Yeah.
I would rather just go to a place that barely charges you anything. You know you're always getting a really good deal.
On it.
Always get a really good deal versus dealing with something where I know nothing's free.
Yeah.
So they give me one fund with no expenses. They got to make their money somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I'm a fan of Vanguard. So is Clark Howard, Dave Ramsey. I learned about it through people like that talking about it.
And you feel like, especially for somebody younger, that's a smart choice in terms of going into investing, especially for the long-term returns on it and not as much headache?
Absolutely. I think there'll be zero headaches. I think you can be whatever you want to be, whether you want to be a fireman, a doctor, a lawyer, an airline pilot like I was. Then you just simply put your money in that, a little every month. It's called dollar cost averaging. You put the same amount in every month. When the market's up, you don't get as many shares. When the market goes down, you get more shares for that same dollar cost amount. And over time, you do that for 30 or 40 years, I think you'll wind up with a really nice retirement.
Yeah.
And then when you get ready to retire, you just live off the dividends.
Yeah.
I don't worry about selling one. Somebody will say, well, what if the market's down right before you retire? I say, well, if you're one of these people that's planning on selling, that could be a problem.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to, I am retired now, but I'm drawing a pension for 5 years from my company. Then I'll be totally on my own. But then I'm just going to simply go online on my account, and where right now I'm reinvesting all my dividends at Vanguard into more shares.
Yeah.
I'm going to simply have the dividends paid into a money market account, which is like a savings account at Vanguard, and I'll have the money, and I'll transfer the money to my personal checking account.
Yeah.
So I don't worry about the market going up and down. All I care about is the dividends.
Yeah. Part of it.
And over time, dividends have increased at a rate that exceeds inflation. And another thing that put me into this thought was somebody asked Warren Buffett, what did they want his wife? What did they want to happen to her money when he passed away? Warren Buffett is considered one of the greatest investors of all time. I think he's worth about $100 billion.
Yeah.
He said, I want them, the money that goes to her, I want them to put it in the S&P 500, put 90% of it in the S&P 500 index, 10% of it in cash or short-term securities. She'll be fine. Don't worry about it. It's a simple, low-cost, easy thing to do. And simplicity sometimes works in the long haul, although many times, several times, I made way more than 10% in speculative investments. But like I also said, several times I lost everything.
Yeah.
It became in the stress, the hassle, the worry. Right now, I am not worried. I'm going to get checks for 48 more checks from Southwest Airlines where I retired from.
Mm-hmm.
When that last check comes, there ain't no more checks coming.
Yeah.
I'm simply going to go online
Yeah.
and have the dividends will now start being put in my money market account. That's what I'm going to live off of.
Yeah.
And the dividends are what they are. So it doesn't matter. Whatever the dividends, that's what I'm going to live off of. Now, of course, I looked at that ahead of time before I took the early retirement package and made sure I thought it was something I could live off of. You have to see what they are.
Yeah.
That's easy to do. I can go on my Vanguard account. I can look at what the dividends were last month, even though they were, last quarter. Or, and even last year for the whole year, and see what they were. And I can decide, okay, could I live off this? I had to make that decision.
What would be the startup cost for somebody in terms of investing, and how much would you suggest somebody putting into it every single month?
I believe Vanguard charges $3,000 to open an account. I believe that's what they call the minimum initial investment. And then I would put as much in as I possibly could, but only put as much in as I knew I was not gonna need to take out to fix my car in 6 months, because then you might be selling when the market is low. I tell people it's a known fact. If you look at a financial calculator, a lot of people have discussed this. If you invest $10,000 a year in the S&P 500 index, and if it performs in the future like it has in the past, and of course there's no guarantee, if you can get 10% in the future like it's got for the last 100 years, in 25 years you'll be putting $250,000. $10,000 a year, 25 years, $250,000. But the account will have $1 million in it if it grows at 10. That's the power of compound interest. So you've got $1 million and you only put $250,000 in it. That's starting to sound interesting to me.
Yeah.
And then I ask people, say, well, how many years do you think it's going to take to get your second million? And a lot of people say, well, 25 more years. I say, no, only about 7 years.
Yeah.
Because now that $1 million is working for you.
You too as well.
So it only takes about 7 years, or actually slightly less, to get your second million.
Yeah.
And then I'll say, well, how many years do you think it'll take to get your third million? And I don't know, but I can't remember that exact number. I think it's like 4 years or 4.5.
Yeah.
And then the next one, it keeps getting lower and lower and lower. So the key to everybody is I'm trying to teach you things I wish I knew
before
30 or 40 years ago. I was doing all these speculative things in these startup banks. I was doing all these hard work things, buying all this rental property.
Yeah.
Sometimes I made money, sometimes I lost money. But if back then I just concentrated on putting the most money in that and let it build over time. Now, you don't get rich quick.
Yeah.
Now, you might hit it big on things. Now, I know people that hit it big on real estate things, but,
Yeah, but sometimes it would play the long-term game.
I would at least play some for the long haul. You can say, well, Tom, there's no way I can put $10,000 a year in to have $1 million in 25 years if the market does 10% in the future like it did in the past. Well, that's fine. Just put in $5,000 a year, and I would only take you 32 years to get to your first million.
Yeah,
and once you
it's
get
still
your first,
not bad. For me, that's still like before I'm 60 years old.
And think about it. Once you get that first million, it's still only 7 years to get your second.
Yeah.
About 4 to get your third. So all those things are still working the same. And somebody can say, well, I can't save $5,000 a year. I'll say, well, how about saving $2,500 a year? It'll just take you 39 years to get to your first million.
Yeah.
But what'll happen is just save $2,500 a year now, but in a few years when you have a better job, then you might can move up to $5,000 a year. Then everything, and then you add more as you go.
This can also be a good idea in terms of for people to invest for their kids too. So you have an account that you have specifically for your child. By the time their child is 30 years old, they don't have a ton of money within that account that they'd be able to take out or just keep it going too as well.
Absolutely, but I would always say fund your own retirement first.
Yes.
That's what Clark Howard and Dave Ramsey, all of them say, because you're going to have to retire one day.
Yeah.
And there's no guarantee that your kids are going to be able to support you. So really, when it comes to kids, now I don't have any kids, so I guess it's maybe easier for me to say, although I have some kids I consider like mine and grandkids because I've helped raise them. There would all be stepkids and grandkids. But fund your own retirement first. Be a good parent or step-parent or grandparent. Show them, be willing to give them your time and guidance, help them. But if my dad would have gave me the money, I never would have figured all this out.
Yeah.
if my dad would have been some rich guy, even though he did really well for himself, buying and selling small tracts of land, if he'd have just gave me money, I wouldn't have figured these things out.
I feel you.
I mean, don't you agree?
Yeah, I feel like there's a big importance on like be able to institute like independence within your children, versus having to solely rely on you, and be dependent upon you for like particular things.
And I'm sure it's a fine line for parents. I feel for parents in trying to give them some tough love, but not so much that. And each kid, I'm sure you've got to do different. Yeah. Some kids may need a little more tough love. Some other kids don't need as much tough love. Yeah. Everybody's different.
Yeah, they do.
Boys, being a parent, I'm sure it's got to be the toughest job in the world.
Yeah, no, I understand. My parents have 8 children. I told you that before.
You may have. I knew you had a lot of siblings. I didn't 8, so wow, that's a lot of It's just not only the financial responsibility, the mental responsibility.
Yeah, too.
So when you see your kid getting a little down, talking, or see him getting off track in life.
Yeah.
Oh man. I mean,
it's dealing with a lot of personalities.
Oh yeah.
That isn't just in terms of like people but people that you're directly tied to. You're having that much more of an emotional tie to too, for most people.
Oh, just so tough. I mean, being a parent, being a grandparent.
Yeah. I can't even think about that right now.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But so somebody like around my age, in terms of investing period, what is your overall advice to them?
I would say do the either index mutual funds through Vanguard. Now, I mentioned the S&P 500 index because that's the most popular and the most well-known. I actually invest in the total stock market index. The only difference between the total stock market index at Vanguard and the S&P 500 index is the total stock market index also invests in all the mid-size and small companies. It's mainly, the total stock market index is probably 75%. The S&P is invested in the S&P 500, but then the other 25% is invested in all the mid-size and smaller companies. So theoretically, over time, as those companies grow, we might get maybe 11%, might average an 11% annual return versus only 10.
Yeah.
So you're only talking about a little marginally better rate.
Yeah.
But anytime also, there's typically about 3,500 to 4,000 stocks in the total stock market index. So anytime you're spreading your money over more companies, you can have less risk.
Yeah.
If they all go under, if every publicly traded company in this country goes under, I think my financial account's going to be the least thing I'm worried about. We'll be in chaos.
Yeah.
This place will be in chaos.
Yeah, total chaos.
It'll be total chaos.
We'll be like the zombie apocalypse.
Or like, I think is it Venezuela that's going through some horrible situation now? I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Yes, I think, I don't know, want to say, maybe I shouldn't even mention. But
in terms of that
it's just
country
chaos.
just itself, or that something going on there that's affecting over here?
No, it's just going on there. I think their economy is just in chaos. And when the economy's in chaos, then you can't get food, you can't get medical supplies. I mean, we have to have a stable economy to be able to get the basic supplies we need.
Yeah, which I think for a lot of people is they see as something that's like they wouldn't be surprised happening in terms of the economy not being as good, especially for a particular country because of COVID right now.
Yeah.
And different things dealing with like lockdowns and all those different things too as well.
It's tough. I've gotten the vaccine. I'm tired of COVID.
Yeah.
I'm tired of wearing a mask.
Yeah.
But I have had the vaccine. I have had COVID, and I do wear a mask when I go out in public in places. I want to be done with it. But it appears, look how resilient our economy has been.
Yeah, to it.
We were down last year, but it's back up. I mean, I don't think being a pessimist is a good idea. Like as far as on America, it hasn't paid off for investors in the past. I used to watch a program called Wall Street Week on Friday nights. I think it came on at 8:30.
Yeah.
Watched it throughout the late 70s through the 80s and the 90s. And it's not on, the original one I watched. It's not on anymore. And there'd be a couple of guys that come on, they'd always be pessimists.
Yeah.
And if they ever called the stock market going down one time, they'd be right. That's all they would talk about. But pessimists have lost. I remember when the Dow Jones Industrial Average first topped 1,000 when I was at Auburn. It had topped, I think, one time in the 60s, but it's at 35,000 today, I think. there's been, and all these pessimists along the way.
Yeah.
I'm going to put my money as well as my hope and faith in optimism.
Yeah.
And people doing good.
Yeah.
And hoping you do good and hoping others do good.
Yeah.
Because if you do good, you'll pay more taxes.
Yeah.
That'll support if you do good, you'll buy more goods.
Yeah.
And my total stock market index account is going to own the companies
Yeah.
that are selling you those goods.
Yeah.
So hey, there's no reason to be jealous of others and hope they do the bad.
Yeah.
If you buy into one of these index accounts, every time somebody goes out and buys something, you're profiting off of that. Every time they buy something from a public company. But most likely everybody's buying something from a public company.
One way or another.
Sooner or later, pretty much.
Yeah.
Most of their purchases will be, not all, obviously.
Yeah.
But sometimes they may buy products from a small business. But that small business may be buying their raw materials from public companies to do what they do. So
that's extremely smart.
So that's I think the future. I'm gonna have to hope the future is gonna be good.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully.
I believe it will. And all those pessimists I watched on Wall Street Week. Oh man, I remember when Marty Zweig called the stock market crash of 1987. Oh, he was so proud of himself. Unfortunately, Mr. Zweig has passed away now, but the stock market recovered, I think, within a year. Yeah. So all of this pessimism didn't do any good. So, and there was another guy, I don't remember his name. He was always pessimistic. Oh man, it's going to be a crash. Financials, but it hasn't. Yeah.
Hopefully it doesn't.
There's going to be ups and downs in the economy. That's the way a free market economy works. But also, by being a free market economy, I think we have one of the highest standards of living in the world for a country of our size. I mean, I've seen standard of living sure have increased since I've been around. Yeah. I mean, I have a smartphone, a car with Apple CarPlay that's wireless and all this stuff and all these things. I mean, my standard of living's increased.
Yeah, we do a lot of things people before would be considered magic, Yeah,
it'd be magic. I mean, poor people's standard of living today is probably like wealthy standard of living was a couple of generations back. Yeah. At least that's the way it was in my family.
Yeah. I want to ask you in terms of you, especially because you've been in Georgia for so long. What do you see in terms of like the major differences from when, not just from when you were a lot younger to now, in terms of how Georgia has changed?
It's just less rural. It's just more people. The truth is, it really hasn't changed that much. People will want to claim changes because of the different demographics, but truthfully, once it gets down to it, the people aren't that much different. Yeah. When I came here, I'm 34 years older than you, I think 33 years older than you, but really, when I talk to you, are you really that much different than I was 33 years ago?
Well, I wasn't that smart, probably.
No, but you know what I'm saying. Money. All these young guys and I meet, they're not really, but the difference is it's what you've concentrated on. It's what you were exposed to. Yeah. My dad bought and sold land, so I'm walking around listening to these deals. Yeah. He's going into banks and, borrowing money to buy property, or he's going into banks to bring his clients in that need to borrow on bigger deals, whatnot. So I'm listening to these people, and, I took advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah, those lessons you got from him.
I just listened. I walked around, and people say, carried his briefcase.
Yeah.
I carried his briefcase, I walked around just listening.
There's a lot of benefit to that. I feel like sometimes, especially like us being younger people, we want to be authorities on certain things when we really aren't. And it reminds me a lot of older systems, cultures throughout the world. What you would do is you sit at the foot of your elders and you listen to them, Because it's they have the knowledge and the experience and the know-how from the trials and error. And so instead of us innately feeling like we know everything, even if we read a crap ton of stuff from online sources, it's still that life experience and the application still isn't there. And so it's good to sit at the foot of your elders and be able to listen to them and from their experiences, whether that be from your father or a mentor or anything like that too as well. And just be quiet and listen and ask questions.
And when I was young, I wanted to think I knew. I remember my dad brings this up all the time. When I was at college, I used to talk to him on Sunday nights. Back then it was the longest it's called. We only talked on Sunday nights a few minutes. I said, Dad, I'm not going to be like you. You're just an ordinary person. I'm going to be a big shot. I didn't say I'm going to be. I'm going to do more sophisticated things. My dad said, oh, really, huh? Yeah. So that's what I'm getting at is we're not that different. I was a kid. I wanted to And as a child, I wanted to skip from being a young college graduate straight to the top, just like kids want to do nowadays.
Yeah.
They want to, go straight to the top, straight to the big house, straight to the fancy cars.
Yeah.
So I understand where they're coming from, but as an older person, I have to say, no, I think everybody's just got to work their way up on their own.
Yeah.
It'd be almost like coming in jiu-jitsu and giving everybody a black belt in a year or two. You know what I mean? They didn't really earn it. They ain't going to be any good. And so
dilutes the meaning of what a black belt is.
It's going to dilute the meaning. They're not going to be any good. It's not going to do any good. So the same thing. That's why you see so many people, not all, but a lot of kids of wealthy families, blow the money and wind up not doing well.
Yeah.
No, not all of them.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have to, work slowly up the path.
I forget who I first heard this from, but they were talking about, and I've seen it before, like in person, where they talk about like different generations being differently, So they'll say that you have like a hard generation, people like that built themselves up, worked hard, everything like that, and then they have the next generation that's more soft because the generation before, because of how much work they put in, then they were like, oh, hey, I don't want my children to have to suffer as much as me, and this, that, and the other, so they mostly spoil their child. You know what I mean? But then that child, once they hit a certain age, it starts going more so downhill, and then you have another generation after that. I think I might be setting up the generations wrong. I think it's like it's more like a 4-tier system, but it's like the next generation after that is like the generation before.
May have to be hard again because their parents were too soft, couldn't make it on their own.
Yeah.
Didn't save money, weren't willing to learn about investments. I think I've heard about before. It could totally make sense.
Yeah.
I could see it out there, and so we just have to try to do the best we can.
Yeah, like a fine line between being successful and how to institute your kids being successful for themselves, too, as well, and finding their own niche too that can help them in that way.
So bringing that up, my dad was big on. He didn't have a college education. He was big on us getting one, and so I think a good niche way. He felt like he was willing to pay for me to get a college education, but then that was it. And I think that's a good way. You make sure your kids have food, good home. And support them through getting an education. Yeah. But after that 4-year degree, you're on your own. I had to pay my own way through law school. Yeah. And I made better grades. Guess what? I was graduating law school cum laude.
Oh wow, nice.
Probably because I was paying for it.
Yeah. Work harder for it.
When I got out of Auburn, C average. Barely go through. Why somebody else is paying? I'm just over there, clowning around. Yeah. Trying to live out the movie Animal House. Yeah. But when I go to law school and I'm paying, all of a sudden I'm on the dean's list all the time. Isn't that interesting? My parents, I didn't think you were very smart, son. You never made good grades before. Now you're graduating cum laude from law school. This is very interesting.
Yeah, something to like inspire you to work that much harder.
Yeah, it's coming out of my pocketbook.
Yeah.
But like I said, then everybody's different. You have to take each kid and try to work with them. But I do feel like giving them too much, man, that you really got to be careful with that. Yeah. And so, I try to offer my grandson, because he's 14 now, so he doesn't want to, come over and do an old guy. But I told him, but anytime he needs money, if my grass doesn't need cutting, we've got 3 vehicles between me and his grandmother. You can wash one of them. Yeah. There'll be something. Yeah, there'll be something you can do to make some money. Yeah. Now, we'll give you some money for Christmas and your birthday instead of buying you a gift because he's 14. But the other times, we offer work for money. We had to let him have a lemonade stand one time. No. He had a yard. Yeah. He had a grass cutting business one summer, and I'd go work with him and let him keep all the money. Yeah. But it was just teaching him work, and it was great times together.
I think that's one of the beneficial things that my dad did for me growing up. Was he always had me doing some type of work. Not necessarily for him, but he had like a lot of friends that have their own businesses and different things like that. And so he would be like, oh, hey, well, I want my son to apprentice with you here and here. And even if it wasn't money I was doing, it was like some type of trade. You know what I mean? So like one thing I did growing up was like African drumming. And so instead of paying for lessons, I worked there, after school. I think like at least 3 days a week. But it helped in terms of instill a lot of hard work and dedication in me, you know, where it's to the point where it's like me and my older brother, we're not working. It feels a little weird, you know.
Yeah.
So we always have to be doing something, even if it's not a job. It's still something that we have to be working towards. Plus, we contribute that to partly like being from Jamaica too. Like, you know, they have like that.
I didn't hear. So you're Jamaican?
Partly. So my grandfather on my dad's side was Jamaican. He came over from Jamaica, you know, and like Jamaicans, they have this thing. Some people talk about a lot where it's about work, you know, and it's like you have to have like 2 or 3 jobs to be considered like you actually work and you're not lazy.
Wow.
You know? Yeah.
When I graduated from high school in 1980, and my dad said, "Look, you need to work for somebody else. Get used to have another boss cracking the whip on you."
Yeah.
You know, and so, but luckily he knew a person. So I got a job as a teller
Yeah.
at the Bank of Zebulon, summer 1980. It was a fabulous place. It's now called United Bank. It was called the Bank of Zebulon back then. Worked there that summer, and I filled in at different teller locations when other ladies were on vacation.
Yeah.
It was mainly, I think I was the only male teller there. Phenomenal experience. And it inspired me seeing other people come in that had financial wherewithal, and I would listen to them. I saved my money that summer and bought. And I remember back in those days, you had to have $10,000 to get a 6-month CD, and I know I had that back. But you could only have $500 and get a 30-month CD. So from my savings that summer, it seems like I was able to buy 3 $500 CDs. But that's probably including the savings I had from those years working at my dad's office. So to me, that was my first investment.
Yeah.
A little bank CDs for $500.
Yeah.
As that was getting my start. I knew I wanted to be wealthy.
Yeah.
Just wasn't sure how I was going to get there.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And I remember, and then it seemed like around 1981, 82, the Bank of Zebulon was mainly owned by a family that also owned Lamar State Bank in Barnesville, and they were going to merge those banks together and call it United Bank.
Yeah.
And I think they were going to sell some more stock, and I wanted to buy stock in it. And my dad said, "Tommy, you're in college. You need to save your money for."
Yeah.
So I didn't, and of course I wish I would have, because that bank did great.
Yeah.
I did wind up in 1990, I think. United Bank bought the old First Federal Savings and Loan in Griffin, and they raised more capital to buy that.
Yeah.
And I was able to invest in them at that time. And it did really well the first 10 years.
Yeah.
But it's only done. The bank's doing great as far as that, but as far as investment wise, it's just, I would say it's just been a market performer.
Do you think it's currently smart for somebody to invest in banks? Particularly start banks too? I
don't think so, and this is why. It used to be the bank regulators required a lower percentage of capital. They've raised the amount of capital that banks have to have for the same amount of loans. So the more capital they raise, that means the more people they're bringing in to invest, so they're cutting the slice of the pie. Remember, like that president did wanted me to shut up?
Yeah.
So they're having to cut the pie more. And it used to be in the state of Georgia, outside banks could not come here and open up a branch. They can now, but it was an interstate banking law, and so they had to buy banks here. There may have even been a cross-county laws. So all these laws made bigger banks have to purchase smaller banks.
Yeah.
And of course, anywhere in the state of Georgia. And so you'd start a bank as a little small bank, and then when a bigger bank in Atlanta, I think, even wanted to come to Griffin, I think in the old days, they had to buy a bank. They just couldn't open a branch there.
Yeah.
The laws have changed, and now out-of-state banks can start a branch here if they want to.
What do you say is the major out-of-state banks that have embedded themselves here since then?
Well, Bank of America came in, and now I think Truist Bank, I think is the merger of the BB&T and what was the bank? SunTrust.
Yeah.
See, but in the old days, in fact, I read an article a couple of years back, so I can't remember the details. They're talking about why the headquarters of Truist Bank, which is the old BB&T Bank and SunTrust Bank, is in North Carolina versus Georgia, because North Carolina didn't have all these laws.
Yeah.
And so the major banks
went there
and they built a bigger presence there.
Yeah.
And I think it's in Charlotte, which I don't think of Charlotte being near the financial hub that Atlanta. I think Atlanta's the international city.
Yeah.
But I think Charlotte's actually a bigger banking hub because of
of
those
that
laws that helped the small community banks probably wound up hurting the banking industry down the road.
Yeah.
That's
I would think too that's probably the reason why so many smaller ones popped up here in Georgia, because there wasn't a bigger one that had more of a monopoly on the scene here, and so there were smaller ones that started populating.
Yeah, I think they were all hoping to start up and then hoping to sell out. And as the laws changed to allow interstate banking to come here, then I believe the bankers that wanted to get rich, they had to come up with another way if they couldn't sell the bank. And I think what they started doing then was for every dollar they put in a startup bank, they would give themselves options to buy another dollar of stock. So now that became a way for them to increase the profitability, but that didn't help the single shareholder like me and you. That was just the guys that came and started the bank. They'd say, okay, we're going to put up $250,000 a piece. And we'll get ourselves warrants to buy another $250,000. But they didn't never buy that other $250,000 until somebody else bought the bank out. So they didn't. So that was their way of and it worked for a few people, but too many people tried to do it. They started loaning too much money to I think mainly overdevelopment. Of subdivisions and all, and the whole thing crashed down. And I think Georgia may have even led the nation in failed banks back in the Great Recession. If we didn't lead the nation, we were close to it. We had too many startup banks. A lot of guys like me thought we were going to get rich doing it, and we had to learn the hard way.
That trial and error would be way too real. But I mean, that story in terms of what led you to how you currently invest and help a whole lot of people though. Not only short term wise, but especially mostly for the long term benefits of it.
I hope if the typical person realize, they don't have to start all these crazy businesses. And if they want to, I am for people starting a business. That's great for this country, but you can make it simply by investing in an index mutual fund through a company like Vanguard. It doesn't matter, like I said, if you're a fireman, policeman, school teacher, nurse, doctor, lawyer, it doesn't, any of those things, you can build you a great investment portfolio over time. Like we gave those examples of the 25 years for your first million, then 7 for your second, then 4. I mean, you can make it. It just takes time. It all depends on how much you can save today. Which would you rather have? Would you rather put that money aside to be wealthy 25 years from now, or do you really want that brand new car? Right now. That instant gratification. Are you willing to do away with instant gratification? For the long term. So, what is that term? Opportunity cost. So if you go buy you a new $50,000 car, or you make the payments on it, those payments are what you could be putting into that investment account, that index mutual fund. Too many people are paying more each month in the car payment than they are to their investment account.
Do you think this is also, do you think that there should be more assets in terms of knowledge, especially for younger people on investing, whether it should be something that's embedded into like the school system?
I think if people had the knowledge, more people would do it. Although I will say, because it takes some self-sacrifice in not buying fancy stuff today, most people probably appear to still not do it, but some will. I think the knowledge is not out there. I think I've told you the story before of being in college and finally taking a course on investments, thinking, man, this is going to be great. This is something I'm interested in. Professor walks in first day of class, hands out the syllabus, goes over it, says, anybody have any questions? I say, yes, sir. I said, now, we're not asking you about the personal amounts you've invested, but could you just tell us what stocks you own and why you purchased those? Just tell us kind of about the what you invested in. And the guy goes, I think investments are too risky. I don't do any investing. I only put my money in the bank. Well, this is a class on investments. Close my book.
How did I learn from you?
I'm going to that's like some guy going to teach you jiu-jitsu. Then I don't think jiu-jitsu works, but I've been watching some videos on it, and he's going to teach you.
Let me show you some stuff I learned on YouTube.
I looked at I don't say that. So I lost confidence, and I felt like this guy. I don't think he knows as much about investing as I do. And so, and like I told you before, in the rest of that semester, he proved me right.
Yeah.
All he knew was theoretical crap.
Yeah.
He's plotting all these graphs on a curve, figuring an angle under a curve. You know, what matters is what products do we think are going to be desired in the future, and who do we think is going to be to produce those products and sell them profitably.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't need to figure all these fancy math. It's just, who's going to be produce those products.
Yeah.
What product do we think is going to sell in the future.
Yeah. I think also, and I have to go in a second, but I think one of the things that like the shutdown really highlighted for me was what can you do in terms of like whether that's investing or business wise period, like currently, where it's like you can be able to bring in income, but it's not something where you have to physically be there in order to do so too.
Doesn't that sound like what we just talked about? Investing in Vanguard? And you reinvest all the earnings while you're young and still working.
Yeah.
And one day, you don't have to wait till you're old to retire. The day you look in that account and you say, man, last year they paid me enough dividends I could live off of it. You declare when your retirement, when you've got enough in there, when it's producing enough income for you to live off of.
Yeah.
And then you just live off the dividends. Looks to me like it's going to be hard to go broke if you never spend principal.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the way I look at it.
Yes, sir. All right, y'all. We're going to end it right there. Very good conversation today, especially on, the subject matter of investing. Please give a mindful ear to everything Mr. Tommy said. And if you have to, don't feel bad, but rewatch it too as well to be able to pick up on all the tips that he talked about today. This podcast isn't for any particular subject matter, but multiple ones. And so we're going to be talking about investing. We're going to be talking about real estate. We're going to be talking about spirituality. We're going to be talking about everything, underneath the sun that we feel like will benefit other people. Hope y'all have a good day, and peace.